the personal perspective. I feel like there is this moment when esports was like really booming, right before what people called the esports winter a few years ago, where every news site wanted coverage. Everybody wanted to like, get a bunch of features in, a bunch of news in constantly, right? Kotaku, I think, Kotaku and Deadspin collaborated on an esports vertical. Obviously, like the Score launched an esports vertical with Score Esports. Actually, we weren't even a vertical. We were totally standalone from launch, which was just kind of surprising. ESPN did esports, right? Everybody wanted to get in on esports because it was booming. And for a bunch of reasons, economy, things slowed down. But I feel like a lot of journalists have a similar kind of arc where, I mean, I also got hired probably right around that same time to do esports coverage because, like, oh, everybody wants esports coverage. I guess I'm going to do esports coverage because I wanted to write about video games. Um, and I have kind of stayed in there because of just the nature of what the Score Esports has been doing and like how we've kind of shifted around in the space and kind of adapted. But I definitely think that because of things like, again, people call it esports winter. It's more complicated than just, oh, esports is dead, because it's not. But because I think of that perception, because of economic headwinds changing, a lot of coverage sort of started going away, which actually made it harder to follow because you needed to be more tapped in. You needed to be more aware of the games. I like to think that like by watching our videos, you can really get a sense of what's going on. But I mean, we have a really dedicated team of people who live and breathe esports, right? You think about like if you are a reader of any gaming blog, any gaming news site, you've got people who care about video games broadly, but generally they're living and breathing their kind of like space that they care about. They really care about Nintendo games. They really care about, multiplayer shooters. They really care about MMOs, right? And those are kind of still getting out there on the IGNs, the Kotakus, of the world. Um, Whereas the people who did that with like League and Counter Strike and Dota and fighting games, aren't necessarily doing that coverage at those websites anymore. And so you really need to find those super dedicated people that you can kind of follow to feel like it's not stagnant. Otherwise, you're like, God, what the hell is going on here? Like a lot happens, and you kind of really need to be tapped in to get it. I also agree with you that like esports has had a lot of problems. I mean, gaming in general has had a lot of problems with like
Absolutely. Yeah.
women, queer people, people of color. It is and esports, has that too. I have found that things have been more welcoming in certain spaces and broadly more welcoming over time. Again, the FGC is awesome, but that is certainly a thing that I think has pushed some people away. Unfortunately, I think that that is a thing that happens in the general gaming media space too, which really sucks because I think the people who actually work, in esports, in gaming, in whatever, are awesome people, right? Because they're pretty reasonable for the most part. It's just sometimes, and even the fans are usually pretty reasonable. Like we go to an event and everything is cool, but there is this sort of subset of like vocal jerks who do kind of overtake the conversation online sometimes, which really sucks. You go to a fighting game tournament and it is extremely diverse, it's extremely queer, and you go online and it doesn't feel like that sometimes, even in the FGC, which is so diverse and queer.
Yeah. I think you really hit the nail on the head with saying that esports had its boom and then it leveled out. And unfortunately, I have a couple things to say to that, so I'm trying to say them in order. So, ESPN had like this esports section that I don't hear about and that, a lot of people were like let go from and things like that. And I remember wanting to write about like Combo Breaker, right? Like
Mhm.
Frosty Faustings, and like, and I wanted to do more. I wanted it to be professional because since I come from a journalism background, like local news, traditional news, I know how to up the production value, right? Not just the tournament itself, not just the live stream, not just the commentators. I think
Yeah.
that's important inside itself, right? But like the way to present it to like the world. I used to write it was called like Janae Esports, where I would write about esports fighting games and everything from a just kind of casual perspective of what's going on. Like, hey, the Overwatch League is happening right now. Like, this is why it's important. This is who's winning. These are the teams. This is why the teams are like, so why people are so like invested in the teams monetarily and attention wise. and I didn't really feel like that was going to get me to be like Jacob Wolf, like, like I just didn't feel that way. And I was like, but I love it, but so I'm going to keep writing about it. And that really did get me far, like with Mortal Kombat. Like I was getting those games for free. I was able to like talk to like the community manager. We're like cool like at some point, we became cool, and I really enjoyed it, but like the payoff was really hard, especially like me being a black woman. And like in the FGC, that's not really, it's a big deal, but it's not a big deal, right? Like it's not as like jarring as to see me like if I was like at League, which I did get to cover League. And I think this is what really, even though it was like one of the highlights of my career, it really kind of made me sink a bit deeper because I got to cover League when it came to Chicago. There was no WGN, there was no ABC, like nobody came to cover League. And I did a write up, and somebody was like, "Oh, why didn't you tell me before it was happening?" And I was like, "The biggest thing came to Chicago that's like outside of like Lollapalooza, you know what I mean? Like League, like people traveled from everywhere to be at League, and like y'all didn't know about it." And then I submitted something, and I was just like, you know what? I think I'm done trying to get esports to the world. I'm done trying to get like the FGC to the world. And I think you do a great job of that, right? I think you, the outlet, like the people that you're able to work with, I think you guys do a great job, but also you're writing for people who know where to look for these things, right? Like people aren't just gonna glance past it. And I believe the last thing that I have to say about this is that nobody's really making esports games like that, right? Like, I don't know if CSGO knew they were going to become like a whole cup, right? Like a league. Like, I don't know if they knew that, right? I know fighting game after fighting game, it's going to be incorporated as it, right? So, like, that doesn't really count. But, like, when's the last time, like, a new fighting game that wasn't, Street Fighter, Tekken, KOF, um, and like even Power Rangers like Battle for the Grid. Like when was the last time like a fighting game was released? And there's been a couple, and then they incorporated that and it was like, hey, we got tournament rules for it. Like that space seems really locked, Or can you think of one? Like, am
I
I
mean, again, it's tough, right? Because I'm like, I want to be like, actually, Dragon Ball Fighters, but like that's also a big franchise with like a
exactly?
big, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? I
yeah,
think that it's, we'll see what this Riot's fighting game 2XKO, which I still
exactly.
hate the name
Project
of, but that's
L.
still the game formerly known as Project L that I refuse to acknowledge this new name of. But the like even that, right, that has like a huge backing behind it. There's still some really cool indie fighters that have a great scene. Tough Love Arena is like a really awesome browser-based fighter that I think is like maybe the coolest game out there. These are Japanese indie, but the Undernight games are my
True.
favorite fighting games in the world right now. But to your point, I think that I'm going to say this, and I'll get back to the journalism thing in a second. But I do think that you can never set out to make a game that's going to be an esport.
Yeah.
I think that's just like a doomed proposition, and I think we can kind of see it a little bit with Overwatch, where the game is doing okay. I mean, it's definitely like a bit of on the downturn, but the whole esports thing fell apart because you can't manufacture excitement. You can't like
Yeah.
esports exists because people want to watch something because they want to play something and they think it's cool to watch it and compete in it, and you can't force that because you can't force people to care about anything. um
Exactly.
and so like Overwatch had this problem, and you're right, Counter-Strike, they didn't make thinking, oh yeah, people are going to play this in an arena in Berlin in 20 years. That's not what they were thinking about. They're like, oh, we're going to make a cool first-person shooter with like different rules. Same with Street Fighter, we're just going to make this cool game that people can play in arcades. And yes, now there's a competitive scene, so when they build a new Street Fighter, they assume there's going to be a competitive scene. But it's not like they build the game and it's only one of Street Fighter V's biggest problems is that it was basically just like a training mode you played between tournaments and online play, and the game did miserably. Meanwhile, Street Fighter 6 has like a whole open world mode where you do single player fighting, and that game is a huge hit, right? Like you can't release a game and say this is just esports. And League wasn't like that, Dota wasn't like that, Counter-Strike wasn't like that, but these games that blew up in that moment, that tried to be that, Overwatch, games that didn't even come out like Breakaway, right? Those games kind of failed miserably. And so when it comes to fighting games, like you just got to build like a cool game that people like first. And if they do, tournament play will come. I'm sure the Power Rangers, they had some really cool. They had like Clockwork making it, and like they had lots of cool talent designing that game. But fundamentally, they're like, we're gonna make a love letter to Power Rangers fans, and everything else kind of will fall into place after. I'm really excited for the new Hunter x Hunter fighting game. I don't think that game is going to be this huge, sick, competitive hit with great balance.
Yeah.
But I'm a huge Hunter x Hunter fan, and I'm like,
Yeah.
cool. It's going to like feel like Hunter x Hunter, and I'm going to play the characters I like, doing the moves I think are cool. And if it's great, then maybe I'll play in a tournament. Whatever.
Yeah. I think what you're saying about the I call it Hunter X Hunter. I know. I know.
You're
I know.
more correct. Neither of us are right. It's a dumb thing to call your thing. Don't put an X there if it's silent.
I agree with that. I think the Hunter X Hunter game is going to be the dang, what was that all-encompassing anime game? The name just left me.
Mugen. You think of Mugen? The like the
No. It
all
had like
encompassing anime.
every anime like ever. It was like Anime
Oh,
Showdown.
Jump Ultimate Stars?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Jump Ultimate stars. So I think it might be like that, where a lot of people were excited, but that's because they got to play somebody who wasn't like
Yeah.
Goku, Vegeta, like they had like One Punch Man, who wasn't like Naruto, like they had
Hmm.
a variety of other people. So I think that's great. And you know what did well for like a split second? The My Hero fighting game.
Oh yeah, I never really paid attention to that one. That was like
Yeah,
an arena battler, I think.
yeah, that one was good for like a
Oh
second, and
cool.
then people were kind of like, and I kind of get it, right? Because unlike Dragon Ball, it will, and I think it already is becoming like a pop culture staple, but it just wasn't at that level to like get people interested. Like I think like casuals, right? Not even like competitive players, but I feel like casuals were really interested. Um, in that game, but like as a competitive player, you're like, yeah, I'm probably gonna play fighters, right? I'm gonna play
Mhm.
fighters over like this one, and that one came out before fighters, so like I don't know. I think they kind
I
of were
think that
able.
that game's like in a long tradition though of like arena fighters that people kind of tend to write off, right? Like the Naruto fighting games, the old Dragon Ball fighting games. People tend to write those off as being kind of simplistic, and they are simpler, but I mean they're very, very fun. I played a lot of Budokai Tenkaichi as a kid. Played a lot of was it Ultimate Ninja? Was that the PS2 or GameCube fighting Naruto game? Like those are really, really strong as like, especially as like an on ramp into fighting games. I feel like they really can like help you understand like what combos are, what a character feels like, stuff like that. So
Yeah, I I didn't get to play a lot of like anime games when I was younger. Actually, I kind of just started my gaming journey when I got into college.
mm,
So it's like I got to experience all of this stuff like with a community and not just by myself too, and I think that also lends to the hype, because you're like, oh, have you
totally.
played this, have you played this, have you grabbed that? um
I,
yeah.
I think that's actually really fundamental to just enjoying video games, to be perfectly honest, right? Like even single player stuff. When I was a kid, right? So I've been playing video games since I was like 6 or something. Like we're working on 24 years of playing video games at this point. Not wasting my life. I get paid to do it. Um, but like the thing about a video game ever since I was a kid was like talking to my friends about playing the video game. I became a critic in part because like the thing I liked to do was play the game, think about the game, talk to other people about the game, get their feelings and opinions, and then go back and play more, right? Like that sort of cycle of discourse about a video game. Now the discourse was less toxic when it was a bunch of, second graders or whatever. But that cycle of discourse was really, really like valuable to me, and that was community, right? You know that other people are enjoying the thing you enjoy, you know that other people feel strongly about the thing you feel strongly about. And I think that like I can't imagine someone getting into video games just like alone in their room, never talking to anybody about it. It just doesn't like never playing with other people, never talking to other people, never sharing their ideas about games. It feels like, I don't know, it just feels like anathemic to like enjoying media in general. Like,
Yeah.
is there a person out there who just sits and watches movie and then just never tells anyone about the movies
Yeah.
they like? Like,
Yeah, that would be interesting. And I think even as much of an introvert as anyone can be, they're still going to find like a forum, like about the
Oh
stuff they
yeah.
want to talk
Oh
about and
yeah.
engage. So I think you're right. Yeah. You were talking about bringing it back to journalism. Do you
Yes, yes. I was gonna say that I feel like, you mentioned like bringing legally, oh, you're in Chicago and like, none of these big outlets want to cover like League of Legends and like bring it to like broad audiences. The thing I was going to say is that like I'm relatively fortunate that like we have this parent company, The Score, and then now Penn, like who just sort of like have believed in us and just said, just like do your thing. This is going to be big. We're successful at this point, and so it's like a little bit more like just keep doing your thing. But for a long time, it was like, hey, like this is going to be something someday, so like keep going, become like a voice in the space. But there's a lot of places like ESPN who just sort of saw the downturn, right? Saw the business start to kind of like get a little bit shaky, saw the venture capital money pull out in some cases, and decided to cut their losses a little. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best idea, because I do think this thing's going to be something. I think it's already something, obviously. I think it's going to be bigger and bigger as time goes on. But sort of, moreover, I think that you are looking at a lot of outlets leaning really hard into the stuff they already know works, if that makes sense, right? I was reading recently all this, the drama going around Kotaku recently, that I don't know if you've heard about, right? But there was a call recently that they were talking about how like, oh, management is forcing them to do nothing but write guides, right? Like only guides, because they know that guides get SEO traffic, and only guides for the biggest games like Elden Ring and Tears of the Kingdom. And it's like, if you only write about if you're ESPN and you only write about the three sports people care about, right? If you only write about like football, soccer, and I don't know, basketball, right? I'm not a sports person. It took me 30 seconds to think of a third sport. But if you only write about those equivalents in video games, if you're like, we only write about the biggest games of this very moment right now, and we never write about anything else. Indie games, like we're curtailing indie game coverage to do more Elden Ring guides. We're curtailing esports coverage to do more this, right? It probably helps your bottom line, but like you're saying, it does stagnate you, I think, in the long term. It does prevent you from finding new avenues. We talk a lot internally about like, how do we cover this game that we don't cover yet, right? Or what's this new game coming out? Can we cover it? Does it, what's the esports hook? How do we talk about this thing? Because sure, yes, like the thing shrinks, but also you're opening your doors to more people, right? More people can read your writing, your work, can be familiar with the journalism you do, whether it's as an outlet or as an individual, if you do open your doors and do those things. And I think there's a lot of people who tried that with esports, didn't saw some results, but didn't see immediate mega giga results, and kind of like pulled back a little bit. And I think you saw that with video games at large too, right? Rolling Stone did video games and then they pulled out, right? Glick still existed, then it didn't. Now they're trying again, and who knows how long it'll last. Um, Washington Post had a launcher, and now they don't. Right? New York Times, I don't know what the state of their current game coverage is, but I remember like a year ago them being, we're going to cover games seriously. And I'm like, we did this. We've been through this cycle. Commit to it or don't. But if you don't commit to it and give up in a year, you kind of destroy the institutional knowledge you built. It's why we have all these like writers who have been in this industry for 15, 20 years. You're saying, you know what, screw it. I'm going into PR, or I'm going into go to write about something else. I think it's awesome that we have places like Aftermath and Remap of people who lost their jobs and are like, you know what, we're going to build our own thing. Like that's really, really cool. And I'm really excited about those outlets. But the larger outlets just are sort of churning through talent, and we lose the people who have been here forever, who can, I mean, we were talking before the recording about like, having a hot take about everything and like trying to focus on the important stuff. You lose some of those people who have a ton of experience reporting on the important stuff. I think that general state of games journalism is really difficult, as you have outlets who aren't willing to try new things and cover new things, and then give up on the new things like covering video games or esports really early on in trying, and it kind of bites. I feel lucky that that hasn't happened to me, but it's a very, very rare situation, I think, that I'm in at the sport. Sorry, I'm
Wow.
rambling. I'm going
No,
on for like hours at a time. I'm so
no,
sorry.
I don't think you rambled at all. I was going to say that a another podcast guest said the same thing about the consoles and
Hmm.
them doing something that could be revolutionary, but being like, hey, this isn't getting crazy returns, so we're just going to throw it away. And
Mhm.
so I completely agree with you, and I love that you're in a unique situation because there are success stories. And I think more people should tell their success stories so people can have hope and at least try. And I love when people, grassroots and make their own stuff. I think that's so important. I have an outlet that I like realize I never talk about, but you'll never see. Like, I think as mainstream as the game got was like Layers of Fear too.
Mhm.
Like it's all indie, all stuff that comes to my inbox that me and a few other writers cover, or people who. So the way my outlet works is that I want people to get into games journalism. So I will show them how to write, like I give them the guide and everything like that. And then they are posting, and then they have their portfolio. And then I don't gatekeep anything. I show them how I get like all of my stuff. If they want to get stuff to their email, if they want to sign up for this, get a press pass for that, like I show them how to do all of that. And that's how I'm able to like give homage, or at least spread the word about the games that come to my inbox, because Bandai Namco is coming to my inbox talking about pre-order. They're not coming and talking about like their new thing. And so I
Yeah,
agree.
that's
I think you said a lot of like profound things. Like, and it's kind of sad. I think that's what I'm feeling right now, right? It's sad that I got it. Okay, so just like I feel like the American dream is to be like, hey, like if you stick it out, like if you keep going, like this is really gonna work in your favor, right? Like if
mhm.
you just have persistence, like you gotta spend money to make money. And then these companies that have the opportunity to do that, they don't do that. They're like, cut it, it's not working. All those people we just hired and told them that they were gonna have like this huge, cut it, it's not working, send them somewhere else. And so it's interesting that like the backs of people who are very interested in this have to spend the time, spend the years, spend the low views, cry about it, go on a like, roller coaster of emotions of being a games journalist, entrepreneur, freelancer, because
Mhm.
that's what you are, just because the Washington Post, the New York Times, ESPN, like all of these places don't see like it worth it until it's happening again, right? Like until there's
Mhm.
like an up. And what I want to say about the current state of esports is that it's going to be self-sustainable. Like
Mhm.
it is on the way to becoming stable, which is what you were saying. And I fully think it's going to be like self-sustaining at some point, because you may not go to basketball games, but there's a bunch of people who don't. And a bunch of people might not go to like the Halo Championship, but like there's a bunch of people who do.
Mhm.
Um,
I'm totally with you. I think we're going from a place where esports, I think a lot of people, I think it's funny. We were talking about this for years in our newsroom and in our Slack and stuff like that. It's just like it feels like we're kind of going in an unsustainable direction. And I think what has mostly happened is just like, we kept our heads low and tried to like, keep everything going. And I mean, things were fine. Like there was never any problems. But I was looking kind of out at the world of esports, the industry, the business, and I was just like a little bit worried, right? Like we are going in an unsustainable direction. And I think things, you're right, that have normalized to we're going to reach a sustainable place because we've had a better realization of like, okay, how many people are actually interested in this right now? Maybe in 20 years more will be interested in it, but we can't pretend like 20 years is today, which I think was a little bit of what was going on for like 2 or 3 years there. And again, we were sort of, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. Like we were always trying to be really careful about that. But I think that a lot of people may not have been. And what really sucks about that though, is like you mentioned ESPN a few times. They laid everyone off. They did great work, right? Like I really liked having other people in the space. Yahoo Esports, ESPN Esports, Upcomer existed for a while. Like there were a lot of other outlets that don't necessarily exist anymore, dedicated esports outlets, which is really unfortunate because there's lots of people there who did lots of great work, lots of good journalists, people who I consider to be my peers or people who were previously my coworkers, right? Who like went to work for other places. And so it's unfortunate because I want these spaces to be like rich and full of reporters who can offer diverse perspectives and tell these stories of this industry. And hopefully it gets back there as we reach that sustainability place. And again, same for the game industry at large. And no, you're saying that it's a little bit sad, but my hope, the hopefulness that I have is in, there are success stories. There are still outlets out there that are pushing. There are still, companies and corporations that kind of believe in this. But there's also smaller stuff too that I am really, really, you know, I really, really love, right? Like I am a Remap listener. I'm an Aftermath subscriber. I think these places are really important. These like writer, worker owned websites and podcasts, because they are, hey, here are these people who have been doing this for a long time and their voices are important to the industry. And so if we can keep that going, right, and keep them talking, I think Aftermath especially, we will be, in a better place in a few years for having done that. And I think that is like, to me, kind of like the next stage. And I think it's next stage of journalism at large, right? Defector, 404 Media, right? These kinds of blogs. I think journalism at large is seeing, a lot of corporations gutting what journalism is and trying to destroy what media is. And that's really scary. But places, I think Defector started the movement, and then you have the Discourse blog and 404 and all the others I've mentioned, right? Like other places kind of like pushing the banner forward of like, hey, how do we keep journalism going in a pretty scary time for the media industry at large? And I think they're doing a great job, and I want to support as many of them as I can.
Wow, that's inspirational. I'm like, maybe I should try it. And I'm like, no, I'll leave it to the other people.
It seems like a lot of work. I am happy to not have to figure out what taxes for an entire company look like. That seems really scary to me.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm happy that people are doing that work, right? It's funny, like my really good friend and I ran a podcast for many, many years in university, and a couple years into both of us like working after undergrad. And we had thought about like, oh, well, what if we like make this a thing and be like, sell some ads and like, and then we were just like, this is too much work. Let's just get jobs. This is too much. This is too much. Let's just freelance and get jobs. We can't do
Exactly.
this.
It's a lot. It's a lot trying
Yeah.
to be self-sustaining for something that you want to do. And like literally by the grace of God, I've been doing it for like 10 years. This year is a bit different because I have started to reach outside of the gaming industry. Um to get like supplement like the stuff that I want to do. Like I do this podcast and I have like a lot of fun to doing this podcast, but I put this podcast down for like a very long time because I'm like I'm burnt out. I'm content burnt out because like when I was like writing for PC Gamer and Tom's Hardware, there's a person like on the news desk who's like, "Hey, here are the stories that we have, or here are the things that we need to do." I have to go search, do it, edit, post, share. Like, and that gets really exhausting to do like by myself. And like, I was really doing that for a very long time. Like because I was starting to see that a lot of these things could be overwhelming. So what I would do is just do a wrap up. I'd be like, hey you guys, here's like my daily wrap up, here's like my weekly wrap up, here's this week in gaming, this week in Xbox, this week, just doing like the whole G4 thing, because they left and then they tried to come back and then they left again. And I don't think it's because people don't want that content. I just Yeah, I don't know. But I was doing that for a bit and I didn't really ever see the numbers on that too. And I was like, why am I stressing myself out to do this if it's not like, and then I'd see people and they're like, yeah, I watched that. And I'm like, you don't know how to like? You don't know how to like? You don't know how to hit a like button? Like, let me know this is what y'all want to see and I'll like do the effort. That's a no-brainer. Um, so
Gosh, yeah. I mean, that's one of the most important parts, right? Is like just the audience telling you they like a thing. I feel like we were talking about the community, the gaming community at large. People can get so toxic, and the loudest people can tell you the worst shit. And it's just like, if you tell me you like something, that's just like 100 times more important. Like the only thing that I will tell people who consume like a lot of like gaming content is just like tell people you like a thing, hit the like button, tweet at them, leave a nice
yeah.
comment. Like it helps like both like business wise, like, oh, I'm making the right choices or to keep going down this choice, but also it's just like, I don't know, it feels good. It feels really nice when someone says you did a good job, because 8,000 people are saying you did a bad job.
Yeah,
Like,
out of my 10 views that I'm getting, nobody's watching it all the way through. And it's like, if I see at least a little bit of retention, then it makes it worth it. Because then,
mhm,
as you said, from like a business standpoint, does it really make sense to keep doing content that nobody wants? And I think this is what like the Washington,
mhm,
like post it. Like, I think this is what a lot of people did because for the people that I know consuming esports content, they wouldn't go to the Washington Post. And I think that was also probably an
mhm.
issue, right? Of like where
Possibly,
they would
yeah.
choose to get it from.
It's possible. I just think that what had happened was they had good stuff, and there was I mean, just like, let's be real, right? Like, there's a financial crisis, right? Like, there's a lot.
Yeah,
We're in a recession that people are pretending we're not in the recession. A
facts.
lot of media outlets had to like take a second look, and they said, all right, this thing is not pulling in. I think part of the problem too is that we are in a bit of a culture that expects 300% growth year over year. And it's just not feasible, right? That's not sustainable. I think you can have it one year, but you probably
Yeah.
can't have it 4 years in a row. And I think some businesses, not all businesses, but there are some major businesses and some major investors and some major um, boards or whatever who want to see 300% growth every single year, and that's not possible. And so I think
Yeah.
some outlets looked at something like Launcher, which probably grew, over 100% year one, and probably maybe even year two. But when it came to year three, it's like, oh well, it only grew 20% this year. The Remap crew talked about this actually when they broke off from Vice after they lost their jobs, which was they got a lot of subscribers the first year they did what was called Waypoint Plus, which is their subscription plan under Vice. And then they didn't pick up a lot more subscribers after that, because it turns out just about everybody who was interested in being a subscriber, being a supporter, had done that already. And awesome, that was great, good. But they weren't getting thousands more every year. And at some point, Vice was like, oh boy, well, you're not growing 300% this year. It's like, yeah, but they're a sustainable business. These people can pay that, like, this altogether pays these salaries. But there is a bit of the question becomes, right? Not to get too, um, anti-capitalist brain or whatever.
Do it.
The question becomes, is journalism a commodity or is it a service? Right? Is journalism a product that we buy and sell that needs to make money for the people at the top? Or is it a service that tells people about the world, that
Yes.
tells people the truth about the world? And it's right now we live in a world where it has to be a little bit of both because we exist under capitalism, and that's how things function. Journalism is a service that is funded by the people who want it to be a commodity. And I think that because of that, there's sort of some situations that are under these systems a little unavoidable. But I think that because they expect it not just to be self-sustaining, but massively profitable year over year. And that's a little bit, that's hard, right? Journalism isn't a massively profitable year over year thing. It's a service that people need to exist in this world. And so any outlet that continues to support good journalism consistently over and over again, just as a service beyond I'm sure they're making profit. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart, but understanding that it's a service and it's valuable, and trusting reporters to keep doing a good job, and keeping the outlet going because they feel it is valuable for a reason beyond simple profit. Um, I'm sure they want the profit too, but it's more than just that for them. I think that's to be lauded, but it is a thing that is causing that, right? I'm sure people were reading Launcher. They broke some huge stories. They did some great work, but to Washington Post's investors or owner, right? Because it's just owned by Jeff Bezos, maybe that wasn't enough, right? Or to the board or whoever manages those decisions, it was like, well, you didn't grow enough this year, and we're having some problems, so we got to cut jobs. And these are the jobs we're going to cut today. And it does sort of, speak to like, yeah, like, what is journalism to you? And I think Washington Post says to us the most important journalism isn't gaming journalism, it's political journalism, it's business journalism, and that stuff is obviously super valuable. Right? I'm not saying that's not valuable, that matters too, but they made the calculus and said, in the world where this is also commodity, we need to cut this. And I don't love that we live in that world. I would love it if we just all understood that like all journalism is great and is valuable and is needed, but it's also just, it is the world that we live in. And again, it's why I think that these writer owned websites are so valuable, because they will just keep going and be self-sustaining. Fingers crossed that they're self-sustaining, right? But they will keep going and be self-sustaining and fill those holes that are kind of left.
Yeah, I agree with you in saying that if they're going to cut something, it's going to be gaming, right? And then what journalism actually is, I think no matter what industry you go to, I feel like journalism is not going to be as important as like, like there's always going to be like in the top 3 tier list. I feel like journalism isn't
Mhm.
always in the top 3, top 5 or potentially the top 10, maybe the top 12.
Mhm.
And so there's always going to be like well, do we really need it? And now no shade to like it well influencers with no ethics, mad shade, all the shade, palm trees of shade, but like now that everyone has been kind of looking to replace journalism, and I learned about that when I started to try to be a part of the esports team like Energy. I remember
Mhm.
messaging them and being like, "Hey, like how can I like be a part of this or help?" And they're like, "Oh, you can do it for free." And I was like, "No, y'all are like owned by
Mhm.
Shaq though, right? Like y'all like you guys are getting Shaq money, and this was like a long time ago." And they were like, "Yeah, no, we just don't have any room for that." And then they hired like a social media manager, which is pretty like I was like, yeah, like I'll do social or like all right. And then I remember they just got like a buttload of backlash because like it wasn't good, it wasn't authentic. They just had
Mhm.
somebody and I was like and I literally messaged them and was like, this is what happens when you don't like put people who are in the space and then like put them on the front lines. Like you're not gonna get anything good. And I saw that happening like so much. And so, journalism is always getting cut, and then there's always like some sort of like nepotism to go with it to be like, oh yeah, such and such's niece can she can write tweets, like let her do it.
Yeah.
So I know that journalism is not the sexiest thing and not something that people uh think about when they're like putting things together. They think about us when they want to put their game out, right? They're like, "Oh,
When
get
we're
the press
advertising.
releases out, get this out, get that out." But then it's like there's a disconnect, right? It's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, well, we know people look at these outlets, but like let's cut them."
Yeah. And again, like I feel really fortunate that like I work for a company that has trusted us and has like put their faith in us for like I said, like 9, 10 years now, right? Like the Story Sports turns 10 next year. Like that's really crazy. Like that doesn't happen very often. And we have people who said like, hey, no, not only are we like trusting people, but people don't work for free. People we get like professionals, we hire people that like original class of people who wrote for the Score Esports were hired out of journalism school. I was hired the day I graduated. Like they took it really seriously, and I think it paid off. But to me, it's a mark to say like, hey, if you take this seriously, it will pay off, right? Like, hey, here's the structure. If you take this seriously, if you commit and you understand what the business actually looks like, and you hire the right people, it will probably work out, right? Because like we're talking about all this big industry stuff, but like there are, like you said, right, there are success stories, and I really do am happy that I can be part of one, if only because it shows that like, hey, if you treat this with respect that it needs, as like a job with gravitas that matters, it is going to work because people react to that respect, people react to the authenticity, people react to people being good at their jobs, right? And that is the thing that kind of makes things go around. And again, I'm just happy that I have gotten to be a part of that, because I've seen, like you're saying, so much of the opposite in the industry, which really sucks, because you just like, well, obviously didn't work for you, you didn't take it seriously, you didn't try, you didn't go for it. And fortunately, I mean, the score did, Penn continues to, so it's good. It's again, to me, it's like a little bit of a like, there's a thing you can do here if you just, and again, Kotaku was doing great before all this crazy VC stuff, right? Like if you just let the people who know what they're doing do the thing they do, it will be sustainable and functional, and people will come and love it. Um, and that's my hope, right? That there's just going to be more people who like trust the writers, trust the journalists, and just let them be good journalists. And then we'll go from there. And I also think the audience will adapt too, right? If that'll come, like they sort of come after the media is structured for them.
I think that people also need to not only hire the right people, but put like the real stock behind supporting them, right?
Mhm.
So not only like trusting them, but supporting them wholeheartedly. Like we have to trust the arts as much as we trust the science, right? We have to support the arts as much as we support the science because, like, while everyone's trying to pay journalists and artists in exposure, like those things can make or break like whatever you're doing, like would it be funny if like I don't know, Overwatch had like South Park level of graphics? Like sure it'd be a gag, but like would it be and I know Overwatch is not like the best example since they're just doing so at this point, but it's like, I think we really need to dang, we really need to, like just be well rounded in our support, right?
Mhm.
Like I feel like if you do anything, this is gonna get really vague, right? Insert vague comment here and outrage. But if you do anything, I think you need equal parts. If you start a business, you need press releases as much as you need a logo, as much as you need people to help you to like reach people. And I just don't think there's a difference in journalism. Like even though it's journalism, it's like you still anyways, it matters what I'm trying to say, but like I'm just saying that I agree with you and
I think
people
fundamentally, I think
yeah.
fundamental. It's like a fundamental thing, right? You got to be a journalist to do this to some degree. It's something I say a lot is that it's a lot easier to learn about video games than it is to learn about how to write. Right? I went to school for 4 years to do journalism, right? To learn how to be a good journalist. That's not something I can just teach someone who happens to like Halo, right? It's awesome that they like Halo. That's useful to me to talk to them. I can learn a lot from them, but I can't put them in front of a news story and have them turn out something that's like immediately going to be great without a lot of work. However, if I take a fresh kid out of journalism school, odds are they like Halo at least a little bit, but it's easier to teach them the rules of Halo, a thing that people are designed to learn while playing the video game Halo, for example, than it is to teach them how to be like they already have the journalism background, right? And so like those fundamentals, like you're saying, are like super important, right? Like you need all of these things, but you also need the basis when you come to it, and you got to trust the people who have those fundamentals that they know what they're doing and they not only have the passion but the skills, like you said, the arts and the sciences.
I think a lot of people hate journalists. Like they always make fun of journalists not being good for being good at
Don't get me
games.
started.
What'd you say?
Don't get me started.
Yeah. And I'm one of those people that I'm not like super, super great like at games, right? Like I'll live stream and I'll play, but people come to kind of just like laugh with me, right? They're not coming because like Janae found an Easter egg. Like, what? I probably missed it. Sorry. You know, but I have those skills of research and I have those skills of writing to the people and I have those skills of not bearing a lead and not being clickbait because I have ethics, and I approach everything like that. And so exactly what you're saying, you could take somebody who has the fundamentals of journalism and put them anywhere. That's the whole point, right? Like I could start writing about finance tomorrow. Like that's no problem for me because I'm gonna do the research. I'm gonna get the lingo. I'm gonna, you know what I mean? Like I'm gonna apply my ethics. I'm gonna it's like we have a template. And then it's like, well, what are we interested in? Okay, well, like, let's go and do more of that. Or, like, what are we not interested in? What's paying the most? Like, where can I get the bag the best? Like, that's what I'm going to go do. So it's just kind of like a lot of people just hate journalists because they want them to be those. And we are nerds with them, right? Like we are those nerds with them, but they want them, well, one, they want them to be like white, cis, male who's like a gamer bro who's going to, just look like them. I don't, sometimes the words aren't as important, but if you ask someone like, oh, yeah, we don't really need game journalism, but you guys will continue to click on like Kotaku, IGN, right? Like half of these forums are because a game journalist posted something that you didn't like, and now you're like reading or partaking in or like spreading about how much you hate it, which is fine, right? Because you're allowed to have your opinion. We write so that you can put pieces together, so that you can like make form an opinion and things like that.
Mhm.
So they hate game journalism. You know, they hate game journalists. They hate game journalism because they want us to be a forum and an influencer and a content creator because they're like, well, you just get free games. And it's like, yeah, but I have to play these like critically and not just like mindlessly, right? Like I can't, and I'm not saying anybody plays anything mindlessly, right? Like don't get me wrong, but like it's different when you're like, oh, I'm just playing to go through it versus like, oh, is this accessible? Is someone, because like if you're playing it, you don't have to worry. Like, and if you're not a person with a disability, you don't have to worry if it's accessible or not. But like
Mhm.
you want to be informative. You don't have to worry about being like colorblind if you're not color. Like, you know, you don't have to worry about the HUD. You don't have to go through all of the settings. You don't have to actually see if they work. You don't have to replay a level to be like, oh, wait, like, why is this thing weird? Like, that's the difference. And so I don't know what they want us to be. I think if we would get a solid answer, I
I,
think
I
we
think
would.
I think they want us to be fans. But they want us to be uncritical fans, right? They want us to be like it was like you said, right? Support their existing worldview, and not be challenged in their worldview. And I think that's really unfortunate because people can learn a lot. I learned a lot by reading critics when I was 11, 12, 13. Right? My worldview was challenged and I learned a lot. And you appreciate games at a deeper level when you take in all these extra perspectives and you take in either like hard news truths or like different critical lenses and analyses. I think they want to have I think it is a natural human response to want to have the thing you feel in your gut reflected back out at the world, right? And it comes back to you, and then it's the thing you feel is validated by someone else saying or doing the thing. And I think that's what they want. I think they just want it validated. And I think that sometimes when it is not validated, they get very, very angry, as opposed to thinking about, well, why do I feel differently than this person? Because what this person's saying is also not necessarily a fact, right? It's a critical opinion. And they don't, I think there's a whole cultural thing that would to get into of like why people are like that. But I think that they just want in a sort of very natural human way to see their opinions reflected back at them. Now, where they go from there to the anger and to the toxicity, that's not okay. But it's why you end up with the like. I've been paying attention. I don't know if you paid attention to like all the controversy around the Elden Ring DLC, where reporters said this is hard. The studio said in interviews this is hard, and then fans when they played it were like this sucks. It's too hard. Because initially the reaction was the toxic fans were like, well, these are game journalists. It's not actually hard. They're just bad at video games, right? And it's just like, well, first of all, this is being given to the people who like FromSoft games, who are probably pretty good. But second of all, like, no, it's actually hard. They made an actually really hard game on purpose. And now you're playing it and now you're mad because it's hard and they nerfed it. There's a headline. Whose headline was it? Was it PC Gamer or Game? I can't remember. Someone's headline was like Elden Ring. Uh, it was like Elden Ring DLC nerfed, even though it was something like Elden Ring DLC nerfed, so now you can beat it like the game journalists did, right? Like it was really funny. It
Oh
was
my
so good. It
gosh.
was so fucking like really good.
Yeah.
But it's like there's a positional thing. It's like us versus them all of a sudden, and it's just like but the reason that they're being like, oh, you're bad at games is because they've decided that that's part of the narrative of, oh, critics don't reflect my opinion back at me, therefore they're bad. And the ways in which I can insult them included saying they are bad at video games. It's like, I don't know, people who play video games are some of the best people at playing single player games I've ever met in my life because they have to beat them without guides. The people who
Yeah,
make
we
guides are better
like
at video games than people who have to read guides.
yeah, exactly. And you know, I like there is a lot for the people who go through games with a fine-tooth comb, and then there's a lot for the people who have to get it out to other people. You know, I think that's definitely a skill in itself. And I as as far as people wanting things to reflect back to them and then also being like you're bad at a game, you know, I guess their logic has to deal with, but if you get all these games all the time, it's like, well, why aren't you good by now? Like, why aren't you, you know? And it's like, well, one, I have to play the game. how I need to play it, right? We're not even
Mhm.
doing a speed run test. Like I'm not the speed runner like content person. I'm like a journalist who has to go through this and tell you what I need to tell you what I think is interesting, what it relates to, and if you like this, you'll like this, and I've
Mhm.
met people who hated that. They're like, "No, what was it? Oh man, there's this really old Xbox game called iDarb, and it was just like a
Oh,
soccer
I know Idar.
platform game. And I was like, yeah, it's a little bit like, I was like, it's giving a platformer, right? So it's like Super Smash, but it's with a soccer game. And they're like, no, it's not like Super Smash at all. And I was just like, hey, I'm really just trying to use language who this is like for, right? Like, you want to
Mhm.
win, it's 3v3, like something like that. And so
That's who developed Idar? I'm trying to remember. Is it? It's not Brandon Sheffield. Is
I'm
it?
not
Is
going to
it?
remember.
It's Mike Mika for sure. It was because this other Ocean, which is now all those other Ocean people do. I can't remember the name of that game studio. I guess actually Frank doesn't, but it's the people who do those like retro remasters and re-releases.
Hmm.
Like they just did the Jeff Minter collection and the Prince of Persia like museum thing.
Hmm.
I know it's them, but I feel like there was like a designer on that I'm not remembering. But anyway, it doesn't matter. That game was really cool. I like that game.
I love
Sorry,
that game.
we were talking about journalism, and was just like, oh yeah, Idar. God, that game's great.
iDarb. I loved that game so much.
Mhm.
I That also helped like jump my streaming career because I played it
Mhm.
all the time on my Xbox. Like, it was so good. Um, but yeah, it's just I like as a journalist, I think you don't care as much that people like have an opinion. Or I had to get to a point. I was like, but I'm creating discourse, and that's kind of what I want, right? I want discourse. I don't want like discord, but I want like discourse of people talking about it, having feelings behind it, and then hopefully at some point their feeling will not be as strong as to completely, dismiss
Mhm.
anyone else's view. So game journalism has always been hard. And it's
But we keep
always
doing it.
yeah, because like that's what you like, right? That's
Mhm.
what you like. You don't want anybody to push you out of the space or anything like that. And I don't have an opinion less for it. I don't diminish myself and being like, well, I don't know. I'd be like, well,
Mhm.
this is what I think, right? Because I was writing objectively. So like this is what I think, and in my current
Yeah.
newsletter I do still do a bit of game journalism, and at the bottom I literally go Janae's opinion, and like I will write my opinion there, and it's still habit, right, to go through all of this and be like, hey, this and this and this and this and that.
Mhm.
And I don't ever remember writing a game as hard. I never ever
Mhm.
remember. And I reviewed a game called like Sandstorm Insurgency or Insurgency Sandstorm, which was like a simulation shooter where like you really had to like know about guns and stuff. And I was like,
Mhm.
bro, I am so lost. But I was like, I'm gonna play it, and then I'm going to look up other games that are like this to see why people liked it. And if I can see like the same things, then I can relate it instead of being like, this isn't really my game, so I don't know what to tell you. That's not what a
Mhm.
journalist does. That's what a fan does, right? Oh, I'm never playing that PlayStation game because I'm Team Xbox. That's what you
Mhm.
do. You're able to be like, I don't have to care anything about PlayStation exclusives because that's not me. I don't get that. Right. And I did it to myself, right? I don't have to be an Xbox journalist. I don't have to be a PlayStation journalist, Switch,
Mhm.
PC. I can even be like a mobile games journalist. I can do any of it because that's what we signed up for. I
Yeah.
think we're just gonna repeat, but
Well, okay. Yeah, I'm with you, right? Like that's the thing that's like the challenge here is also understanding that like we care about a breadth of games that are a little different. We also play more games and think about games more. And that doesn't make us better or worse, it just makes it different. And it's why you want to read those perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Um Also, I'm gonna say I said earlier that those former other Ocean current digital clips guys made a Prince of Persia collection. I meant Karateka. I was just gonna be mad at myself if I never corrected myself because I'm a
Okay.
nerd. But yeah, I fully agree with you that like the challenge is in like kind of getting people to understand that, and that breaking down those walls would be really nice, but I think it will take a while before you get really more of that. Again, the thing that I like is being in these smaller communities right now, the ones that care about these like small worker owned and writer owned blogs that these are a little bit more positive and have a little bit less of like the rank and file that like read the IGNs of the world. And even again, 99% of those people are probably lovely. It's just you get 1% of people who are jerks on Twitter. And, hopefully they stop being jerks someday. I don't know. I will say to your point before about like the person you are and them wanting a certain kind of person. I am in a weird place where so I'm a trans woman. I came out. I haven't really gone. I used to do a lot of on camera work before I came out, and did I've done very very little post transition for a bunch of reasons, mostly just time. But it's very interesting seeing the ways in which people will like fundamentally respond to me differently in the audience than before, right? And I was not surprised, right? I know that I have lots of people I have friends who are women who have been on camera who've worked in the game industry for years, but it is notable the way in which you see very specifically that they are looking. Some of these people are looking for a specific kind of human to say their opinion back to them, and that really sucks. That really, really, really sucks. Because there's lots of people out there who you can learn from who are nothing like you, and that's what's great about again to go all the way back to the like one of the first things I said. One of the cool things about playing video games is that you get to talk to other people about them and share your opinions and share your ideas. And if you never do that, like, are you really enjoying video games? Like, I don't know. Are you really having fun if you're in an echo chamber? I guess it's like I could never understand that, and maybe they are, but it just doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah.
I fully agree with you. And I do think it's silly that people look for the person. So it's the person you feel like you could try it with, right? That's what they do. They're
Hmm.
like, you're
Yeah, yeah,
somebody
yeah.
I could talk to crazy. Let's go. You're somebody I don't have to filter myself with. And you're like, you are, like, you do, though. Like, I don't know what you thought this was, but like, this
Hmm.
isn't that. And I don't ever want you to think you could talk to me like that just because you think that I'm something in your head, just because you make an opinion about me without knowing me. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting. On camera work is interesting. Bylines with your name are interesting. Like, just being out there, being able to have like this public facing platform gets a bit difficult because like people will just look for any reason to be like, oh, you're so like I remember I was posting about Mortal Kombat at like Combo Breaker, and I like posted the video, and like there were so many comments about like she's ugly, this person's ugly, the one in the middle is really cute, and I was like, but you wouldn't have found my video if I didn't tag it Mortal Kombat, right? And then you also wouldn't have found my video if I didn't tag it like women in the FGC, right? So you came here looking for something, and I have the answer, but like this is what the comments are about. And
Hmm.
so I laugh now, but I think it took me a while to laugh and be like, oh, you guys are bored. You guys
Hmm.
are bored. And because you actually don't have the courage and the strength to be in a public facing, you know what I mean? Like to do the things that like we're doing, you're gonna have all types of opinions and how I should have did this. Like I remember I played Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I played it forever because it was so long, and like I had to review it, and I just remember staying up and re-recording and recording, and my equipment wasn't working, and so I was like, "Hey, I'm playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla," and the comments were like, "Can you be more excited on my stream?" No. No, I can't. Or like it was like a review, and I was like, "Hey, this is what you want to learn," but I wasn't like, "Hey, you guys, welcome to the stream. Welcome to the review. Here's what you're gonna learn about Assassin's Creed today." And like I'm like, y'all came here for information. That's the equivalent of be like, "Hey girl, why don't you smile? Why don't you mind your business? I
Hmm.
gave you what you came here for. You didn't come here for my bubbly personality, or you'd be here." Right? So if this is your first video of me, that's why you're like, "Oh, can you don't even know me. You're just like, I just want somebody to be more enthusiastic." No, because I feel like if I was I don't even remember his name. Is it Mob? If I was Mob from Mob Psycho, you would expect me to be very monotone and boring and just give you the information that you want. So I
Yeah.
say all of that to say this is the end of the episode.
We haven't even talked. I was gonna be like, we talked so much, and like, I was just gonna be like, we talked so much about journalism, we haven't talked about video games. So,
You know what? It's all in a day's work. It was adjacent around it. I got
mhm.
one question. I got one
Sure,
question for
hit
you,
me,
and this will be
hit
our
me.
hot takes section. Why do you think Mortal Kombat is not doing as well as Tekken or Street Fighter 6 this year?
Okay, so this is where I grand reveal that I'm a Mortal Kombat hater. I don't really love Mortal Kombat. I think mechanically, I don't. I respect people who play it. I understand that there's a game, a really deep, interesting game there, but I don't find it that interesting. I find its fundamental, like, its combo rules to be uninteresting. I don't think NRS is really that great at balance. I think the ways in which that game, NRS games often in their later years tend to devolve into either a zoner that crushes you or a hyper quick pressure rushdown character that crushes you kind of bores me. That said, every time I go to a Mortal Kombat event, I'm like, oh, maybe this game is cool. And then I fire it up when I go home, like, ah, no, I still don't like this. Mad respect to everyone who does. I'm not saying they're bad games. I'm just kind of a hater. I was at the Mortal Kombat Final Combat Finals
In
in
Canada.
Toronto. Yeah, it was in my backyard. It was actually in my university.
Cool.
I was there a few weeks ago to do some reporting, do some interviews. We actually small plug. We'll have a video coming out in about a month. I just finished writing it. But we are,
They'll have a video coming out in July or August because it's June right
yes,
now.
yeah.
Yeah,
Whenever this comes out, July or August, please watch it. It is going to be about Sonic Fox, who is a
of
great person.
course. How
Love
could
Sonic
you
Fox.
not?
Always a great person to talk to. But I was there and I enjoyed it. I was actually also in the first Final Combat in Chicago a few years ago, which was,
Hmm.
speaking of Mortal Kombat in Chicago, which was
I
the,
was there.
oh, were
I
you?
have a picture with
Amazing.
the trophy was like, no, wait, that was Injustice too.
That's probably different because Final Combat was the day COVID started, and so they didn't let anybody in. We were
Oh,
only there because we had like a deal with, we were part of like a sponsorship deal, and so like we were just there as like official media. So like we were there, but we were the only people in there that weren't tournament staff or players or families that were allowed in the event,
okay.
which was wild because it was like this was March 2020. Like it was like we got out of there, and it was just like I don't know if we can get on a plane right now. It was literally day zero of COVID. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But anyway, um, I think Final Mortal Kombat's problem for Mortal Kombat One's issue is sort of, I think, twofold. One, I think that I think that they've kind of screwed the pooch on communication. I think that it is like they weren't talking about anything for a while, and the changes they were making were baffling, and they weren't dealing with the game's biggest problems, and so a lot of the core players got really upset. And I think that that is a huge problem. Now, Mortal Kombat 1 sold really well because every Mortal Kombat game sells really well. It's the competitive scene that is a little bit smaller. And the competitive scene has never been as big as Street Fighter or Tekken, at least in the modern era, because the game just doesn't have as strong balance, doesn't have as strong communication from the dev team, right? That's sort of been a running trend throughout Mortal Kombat's modern history. It's not to say that it's bad, it's just, it's been a struggle for them. I think the other problem too is people knowing that this game has a real shelf life. We know that Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8 are going to go away one day, but Street Fighter 5 and Tekken 7 lasted for like 7, 8 years. Mortal Kombat is going to be here for like 3, you know, and then there's going to be a new one. And so I think that sometimes discourages you. That said, I think this game is particularly struggling because of some balance issues and communication issues that have really turned a lot of people off the game. And then the other thing that I kind of got the vibe from people who were at that event was like, some people just don't like the game. I love an assist based fighter. I think they're grimy, they're fun, you can do some crazy stuff. But I think a lot of people feel like the game got maybe a little too grimy and a little too single player at times. When Johnny Cage is pressing buttons at you for like 30 seconds and you like plus forever because you have Cyrax doing his spin and he just gets to keep hitting you, or you've got Chameleon doing the Jade glaive back and forth, and you just have given this character who's always plus a way to deal with the one problem he has, which is sometimes he's not plus. You're just like, what are we doing here? Or I know they just nerfed him, but Peacemaker, who just gets to like be the world's greatest zoner, who happens to get an assist that also gives him incredible mix up and pressure. It's like, what these choices that we're making from balance perspective, I think that stuff is kind of cool, but I also don't play the game. And I can understand that when you're playing the game and like $200,000 on the line, you're like, Sonic called the game kusoge in the interview, kusoge being Japanese for shit game, which is a term that people use for when a game is like ridiculously broken and like silly and you don't take it seriously, but you
That's
play to have
right.
fun. It's a little bit of a kusoge. And I think that's making some people not that excited about it. That said, I think all those people will still play if there's a season 2 of the pro competition. And basically everybody I spoke to at Final Combat told me that they're much more hopeful for the game now than they were like a few months ago.
Oh, good.
And so I think that that is like a pretty good sign that all of these people are like, hey, like the game will be in a better place. So that said, Sonic Fox also told me that they're going to be taking Tekken really seriously and they're grinding Tekken for EVA. So, you know, actions speak louder than words if they're playing Tekken, not Mortal Kombat, but they'll probably play both. And I'm sure they'll still do well at MK.
Yeah, it
Um,
really, the tier list for this year's fighting games seem to be not counting like Under Night and Birth because I know that has a community, and it's just not as big. It's just not
there are
as.
millions of us, Janae. There's a million. There aren't millions of us.
I mean, but you can't tell the other people that, right? Like I feel like Under
Mhm.
Night and Birth. Um, I think it just doesn't get as much play, and not play, but like as much show at like, but they'll still have it at the tournaments, and like
Yeah,
that. I
totally.
think that is like speaking volumes. So I think the tier list for this year is Tekken, Street Fighter, and then MK, just because I feel like those are always
To be perfectly honest with you, Guilty Gear is a lot bigger than MK right now.
what
Yeah,
good
Guilty
for
Gear Strive is
them.
really, really popular. It's
Good for them.
MK. What were the combo breaker numbers? Because the combo breaker entrance numbers are a really good like litmus test for this.
Yeah.
And it was like Tekken was number one. Yeah, here close of registration numbers. Tekken had 1,620. Street Fighter 6 had 432. Guilty Gear had 863. And then I've got to scroll way down to MK1 at 274.
Oh
Under Night had
wow.
more people than
Okay.
MK. Grand Blue had more people than
Grand
MK.
Blue,
It's a
yeah.
tough time out there for MK.
I feel like
People do
Grand
not
Blue is
love this
very
game.
consistent though. Like I feel like
Grand Blue had like 600 people for this, which is crazy to me because that game I played. I think that game was really, really good. It came out with terrible netcode during COVID, and I was like, I can't play this game.
mhm.
I don't get to leave my apartment to play FIFA. I can't play this game online, so I'm not playing it. But I've heard that people really like it. They fixed the netcode problems with Rising. But I think that yeah, it has like a pretty dedicated core of fans.
Yeah.
I also think if you play Uni, you probably also play Grand Blue. Like you probably are entering both. So there's a little bit of a 2-for-1 because both of them have about 600 people at Combo Breaker.
Mm.
But yeah, it's a tough time. Combo Breaker barely had more people than Guilty Gear Xrd, the last Guilty Gear, not the current one.
Oh wow.
So it's a hard time out there for Mortal Kombat, but
Wow.
Tekken's doing
MK.
great. So you got your other game.
Yeah. Do you play Tekken?
I play some Tekken 8. I'm mostly a Street Fighter girl. I come from a Street Fighter background. It's funny, I was talking to somebody at Final Combat who was also kind of came in with Street Fighter 4, and we joked about how it's like an RPG where you're an 09er and then you subclass into other fighting games.
Mhm.
When Street Fighter 5 was dog. So I played Street Fighter 4 and then Marvel's Capcom 3. And then I played 5. I played a lot of 5 despite not liking it that much. Um, and I played Under Night. I played Persona 4 Arena. I got into Tekken with Tekken 7. Um, yeah, I basically in Dragon Ball Fighters. Basically, like my niche is like very footsies based neutral games, like Tekken. I mean, Tekken is a 3D version of that, but like Tekken, like Under Night, like Street Fighter, and tag anime fighters like Marvel and Dragon Ball Fighters. I like Guilty Gear. I'm not a huge Strive fan. I liked Exart a little bit more than Strive, and it's but like I think those games are really cool. I'm just not as much of a fan of whatever for whatever reason of the like 1v1 anime fighter. Don't know why, just not as much my thing.
That's cool. This has been informative because like I always have to ask when we meet other FTC people. I'm like, what else? And like tell me like your roster. I love to hear it because it's always like I've never touched Guilty Gear. I've touched like KOF and Virtue Fighter and things like that,
Hmm.
but like I've never touched Guilty Gear. But
Strive
like
is a great onboard into the series. It is probably the best, easiest game to pick up. It's pretty different than the previous ones in a lot of little ways, but just from getting what the game is, Strive is probably the easiest way to get in, and is really popular based on all of the memes I see online.
I'll have to put it on my list because I haven't. tried it, but I'll have to put it on my list because I even tried Them's Fighting Herds. I
Oh, that
thought
game's
that was,
great.
yeah, I love that one. That one's really fun for me to play. And Skullgirls, I tried for a bit
Yeah.
as well too. So
I'm a Skullgirl sicko. As a Marvel fan, I'm a Skullgirl sicko, and I also like them fighting cards for similar reasons.
yeah, this has been amazing. Thank you so much, Danielle, for talking to me. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and your knowledge. And I want to plug you. So tell
Sure,
people
yeah.
all of your stuff, who you write for, what you're doing.
Sure, yeah. So first and foremost, thank you so much for having me and putting up with me just like rambling on about the games industry, games and media
No
industry for like
problem.
40 minutes or whatever. But yeah, you can find all the work that I do at the Score Esports on YouTube. I think you just type youtube.com/score esports, or you just type our name into the search bar. You will get lots of amazing content. We have videos every single day about esports, news content, big features. We've got some documentaries in the pipeline. Like, there's some really, really cool stuff coming. I don't necessarily know exactly when this goes out, but in the coming weeks, in June, July, there is our Story of mini doc series is currently running. We have a season of that going. After that, we're going to have another mini series that I can't talk about yet, but it's going to be really cool. Another old show we're bringing back for the fans. We have, and then yeah, lots of great videos every single week. We're also at the Score Sports on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. If you want to follow me personally, I don't use Twitter that much these days. I'm mostly in read only mode on Twitter, but I am at underscore Danielle Rosen, DANIELLEROSEN with an underscore in the front. You can follow me on Blue Sky. I think I am at Danielle Rosen.bluesky.social or .bsky.social. I use that a little bit more. I use co-host a lot. I'm co-host dot is it co-host.org? Co-host.org/Danielle. You can find me there. And I think that's all the places. But yeah, mostly the YouTube channel. Everything I do is on the YouTube channel, and I have a little bit of a hand in any video, in almost all the videos that go on the channel, which is a lot of fun.
Can you give us an exclusive before we go?
An exclusive. Well, I told you about this Final Combat documentary, which isn't even announced yet. But what do we? I
Oh,
mean, to be fair, like we don't really announce our projects super far in advance unless it's like
yeah.
a really special mini series. When does this go out? Do you know?
No, I pick and choose. I pick and
Okay,
choose when
okay.
it goes out. So, like, if it's something that's time sensitive, I push it up on
Oh
the.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So nothing super time sensitive here, but I can say so. Like I said, we've got Story upcoming. Given that I don't know when this is going, I will say that this weekend we have a story of about the streamer Tyler One. The rest of the season is Potter, the Valorant coach. Um, then Reggie, the League of Legends TSM CEO, and Faker, the iconic League of Legends player. Those are the rest of the episodes for the season. We've got some cool docs in the pipeline about, for fighting game fans. I'm going to be at Evo putting together a video that is going to be really, really cool at Evo. If you happen to be at Evo in July, if this goes out before then, say hi. If you aren't, don't worry about it. But I will be at Evo. We will have a really cool Evo video this year because we are sending a crew in to interview everybody and get as much footage as possible. There's an exclusive. I don't think anybody knows that we're doing Evo yet. So it's going to be really, really cool.
I love that. I love hearing that the FGC is going to get some love. And as long as you're over there, I feel like it's going to be continuous. So, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Y'all, thank you for listening. Patreon, thank you for watching. Until next time, you guys, stay safe, be kind, wash your hands, wash your butt, right? Other people can have opinions too, unless it's life threatening, right? So let's be mindful of that. But we will talk to you guys on another episode.